The lake was a mirror reflecting the fire of a Tennessee sunset, and I was drowning in it, not the water, but the weight of her laugh. Sarah stood 3 feet from me, her blonde hair catching the last light, and I swear in that moment I forgot how to breathe. I'd known her for years, my straight best friend, the one who'd never see me the way I saw her, and yet here we were, fishing poles in hand, pretending the world wasn't tilting under my feet. My name's Emily, and I've been in love with Sarah since we were 16, sneaking beers behind her dad's barn in our tiny hometown of Willow Creek. Back then, I didn't have a name for the ache in my chest when she'd hug me too long, or when her blue eyes locked on mine during a sleepover. Now at 28, I knew exactly what it was, and it was killing me. We'd grown up, moved to Nashville together, built lives side by side, her with her marketing job and string of boyfriends, me with my mechanic gig and a heart that refused to let her go. This fishing trip was her idea, a weekend getaway to unplug, she'd said, tossing her hair with that grin that could unravel me in seconds. You're hopeless with that rod, Sarah teased, her voice pulling me back. She stepped closer, her boots crunching on the gravel shore, and grabbed my line to show me how to cast. Her fingers brushed mine, warm and sure, and my pulse stuttered. Like this, she said, guiding my hands, her breath close enough to stir the hair by my ear. I nodded, pretending I was listening, pretending I wasn't memorizing the freckles on her nose. The lake was quiet, save for the hum of cicadas and the occasional splash of a fish. We'd rented a cabin nearby, a rickety thing with a porch and a view that made you believe in second chances. Sarah had been different lately, quieter, her smiles tinged with something I couldn't name. She'd broken up with her latest boyfriend, Jake, a month ago, and I'd been the one to hold her while she cried, my arms around her, my heart screaming to tell her the truth. But I didn't. I never did. She was straight and I was her friend, her best friend, the one who fixed her car, made her laugh and kept her secrets. That was enough. It had to be. You ever think about running away? Sarah asked suddenly, her voice soft as she reeled in her line. She wasn't looking at me, her eyes fixed on the water, but there was a tremor in her words. I froze, my rod dipping toward the lake. Running away? I echoed, trying to keep my voice steady. Like from Nashville? From everything, she said, turning to me. Her blue eyes were raw, unguarded, like she'd peeled back a layer of herself I'd never seen. The job, the city, the expectations. Don't you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? My throat tightened. I wanted to say yes, to tell her I'd been running from my own truth for years, hiding behind flannel and grease-stained hands so I wouldn't scare her away. But I just shrugged, forcing a laugh. Guess I'd miss my truck too much. She didn't laugh back. Instead, she set her rod down and sat on the shore, pulling her knees to her chest. I hesitated, then joined her, the damp grass cool through my jeans. The sunset was fading now, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold. For a long time we just sat there, the silence heavy with things we weren't saying. I've been thinking about you, she said finally, so quiet I almost missed it. My heart stopped, then slammed into overdrive. I turned to her, but she was staring at the water, her fingers twisting a blade of grass. Me. I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, still not looking at me. You're different, Em. You're real. Everyone else feels like they're playing a part, but you're just you. I wanted to laugh, to tell her she had no idea how much I was pretending, how much it cost me to keep my feelings locked away. But her words hung between us, fragile and dangerous, and I didn't trust myself to speak. Instead, I reached for her hand, just a light touch, testing the waters. She didn't pull away. Her fingers curled around mine, soft and warm, and for a moment, I let myself believe this was real, that she felt it too. The moment shattered when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She flinched, pulling her hand back to check it. It's Jake, she muttered, her face clouding over. My stomach twisted. Jake, the ex who never really left, who'd call her at 2 a.m. and leave her in pieces. I hated him not just for how he treated her, but for how he made me feel invisible. You don't have to answer, I said, sharper than I meant to. She looked at me surprised, then back at the phone. I know, she said, but her thumb hovered over the screen. I stood, brushing grass off my jeans, trying to hide the sting. I'm gonna check the cabin, I said, my voice tight. Make sure we've got firewood. Wait, she started, but I was already walking away, the crunch of gravel drowning out whatever she was going to say. The truth was I couldn't stay there. Not with her holding on to Jake and me holding on to a dream that was never mine to have. The cabin was dark when I got there, the air thick with the smell of pine and damp wood. I busied myself stacking logs by the fireplace, my hands shaking as I tried to shove down the ache in my chest. I'd spent years loving her in silence, telling myself it was enough to be her friend. But tonight, with her hand in mine and her words burning in my ears, I wasn't sure I could keep pretending. I heard the door creak open behind me. Sarah's voice was small, uncertain. I didn't turn around, just kept stacking wood, each log a barrier between us. You didn't answer him, did you? I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. No, she said, stepping closer. I didn't. I turned then, and she was right there, her eyes searching mine like she was looking for something she'd lost. The firelight flickered across her face, and for the first time I saw it fear, yes, but also something else. Something that looked like hope. The cabin's silence was louder than the lake, pressing against us as we stood there, inches apart. Sarah's eyes held mine, and I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a cliff, one wrong move away from falling. I wanted to ask what she meant, why she was looking at me like that, but my voice was trapped somewhere between fear and hope. I'm sorry, she said finally, breaking the quiet. For earlier. For everything. She stepped closer, her boots scuffing the wooden floor. I don't know what I'm doing, Em. I just know I don't want to lose you. My heart lurched. You're not losing me, I said, but the words tasted bitter. I'd been losing her for years, piece by piece, to boyfriends, to expectations, to the life she was supposed to want. I turned back to the fireplace, striking a match with more force than necessary. The flame caught, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Sarah sat on the couch, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. You're mad at me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can tell. I'm not mad, I lied, tossing another log onto the fire. The truth was I was furious not at her but at myself. For loving her. For staying silent. For letting her ex's name ruin a moment that felt like it could have changed everything. Then why won't you look at me? She pressed, and damn it, her voice cracked, pulling my gaze to her. Her eyes were wet, her hands twisting the blanket like she was holding herself together. I wanted to cross the room to hold her, to tell her everything, but I stayed rooted, the fire's heat burning my skin. I'm looking at you now, I said, softer than I meant to. What do you want, Sarah? She opened her mouth, then closed it, like the words were too heavy to lift. I don't know, she admitted, and it stung more than I expected. I feel like I'm drowning, Em. Like I've been trying to be someone I'm not, and you're the only one who sees me. My chest ached. I wanted to believe her, to think she meant what I hoped she meant, but I'd been down this road before, reading too much into her words, her touches, her smiles. You don't have to be anyone else, I said, my voice rough. Not with me. She stood then, crossing the room in 3 quick steps, and before I could process it, her arms were around me. The hug was fierce, desperate, her face buried in my shoulder. I froze, then melted into her, my hands finding her back, her hair, the familiar shape of her. She smelled like lake water and lavender, and I wanted to stay there forever. I'm scared, she whispered against my neck, and my heart broke open. I don't know what this is, but I feel it, Em. I feel you. I pulled back just enough to see her face, her eyes wide and searching. Sarah, I started, but she shook her head, pressing a finger to my lips. Don't, she said. Not yet. I need time to figure this out. I nodded, swallowing the words I'd carried for a decade. She wasn't ready, and maybe she never would be, but she was here in my arms, and for now that was enough. We sank onto the couch, her head resting on my shoulder, the fire crackling as the night deepened around us. The next morning the lake was shrouded in mist, the air cool and heavy. We packed our fishing gear in silence, the weight of last night lingering between us. I caught her glancing at me, her expression unreadable, and I wondered if she regretted what she'd said. We drove back to Nashville in her old Jeep, the radio filling the gaps in our conversation. She talked about work, about a new client, about anything but us, and I let her because pushing her felt like risking everything. Back in the city, life slipped back into its rhythm. I fixed cars, she pitched campaigns, and we danced around the truth like it was a live wire. But something had shifted. She'd text me late at night just to talk. She'd show up at my garage with coffee, lingering longer than she needed to. And every time her hand brushed mine, I felt the spark of that night by the lake, burning brighter each time. Then 2 weeks later Jake showed up. I was closing up the shop when I saw his truck parked across the street, Sarah leaning against it, her arms crossed. My stomach dropped. He was tall, all charm and sharp edges, the kind of guy who knew exactly how to pull her back in. I watched from the garage, my hands clenched around a wrench as he talked, his gestures animated, her face guarded but softening. When she laughed it felt like a punch. She saw me then, her eyes locking on mine across the distance. She said something to Jake, then walked toward me, her steps quick. "Hey," she said, breathless. "Can we talk?" I nodded, wiping my hands on a rag to hide their shaking. "What's he doing here?" I asked, nodding toward Jake. "He wants to get back together," she said, and my heart sank. But I told him no. Relief flooded me, sharp and dizzying. "Why?" I asked before I could stop myself. She looked at me, her eyes steady despite the flush in her cheeks. "Because I'm figuring out what I want him. And it's not him." The garage smelled of oil and metal, but all I could focus on was Sarah's words, hanging in the air like a promise I was afraid to trust. She stood there, her blonde hair tucked behind her ear, her denim jacket slipping off one shoulder. I wanted to ask what she meant, what I meant to her, but the words stuck in my throat. She said, stepping closer, her voice low. "I've been thinking about that night at the lake. About what I said. I meant it." My pulse raced, but I kept my face neutral, leaning against the workbench. "You said you needed time," I reminded her, my voice steadier than I felt. "What's changed?" She hesitated, her eyes flicking to the floor, then back to me. "Everything," she said. "Or maybe nothing. I can't stop thinking about you. About us." The word us hit like a spark, igniting something I'd buried for years. But doubt crept in, cold and sharp. "Sarah, you're straight," I said, hating how blunt it sounded. "You've always been straight. What's this about?" Her face fell, and for a moment I thought she'd turn and leave. But she didn't. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of green in her blue eyes. "I don't know what I am," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I know how I feel when I'm with you. Like I'm home." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But I'd spent too many years watching her date guys like Jake, convincing myself I was just her friend. "You're confused," I said, softer now. "You're hurting from the breakup. I don't want to be your rebound, Sarah." "You're not," she said fiercely, grabbing my hand. Her touch was electric, grounding me and unraveling me all at once. "This isn't about Jake. It's about me finally being honest with myself. And with you." I searched her face, looking for a lie, but all I saw was her raw, vulnerable and terrified. My heart pounded as I realized she was serious. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm saying I'm scared," she said, her grip tightening. "But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of this. Of us. I want to try, I want to see where this goes." The world tilted. I dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here I was paralyzed. What if she changed her mind? What if I wasn't enough? But then she smiled, that soft, hesitant smile that had always been my undoing. And I knew I couldn't walk away. "Okay," I said finally, my voice thick. "We'll try." Her face lit up, and before I could process it, she was hugging me again, her arms tight around my neck. I held her back, my hands trembling as they settled on her waist. For the first time, I let myself hope that this could be real. The next few weeks were a blur of stolen moments and tentative steps. We went on dates, quiet dinners at hole-in-the-wall diners, walks along the Cumberland River, late-night talks on my couch. She was nervous, second-guessing herself, but every time she reached for my hand or leaned into me, I felt her certainty grow. I was cautious too, afraid of moving too fast, of scaring her away. But with every touch, every laugh, the walls I'd built around my heart started to crumble. Then came the night that changed everything. We were at a bar in East Nashville, sharing a basket of fries, when a guy from her office spotted us. He was drunk, loud, and before I could stop him, he was at our table grinning. "Sarah, didn't know you were into girls now," he slurred, his eyes flicking to our joined hands. Sarah froze, her face paling. I squeezed her hand, ready to shut him down, but she spoke first. Yeah, she said, her voice shaking but firm. I am. The guy blinked, then laughed, stumbling back to his friends. But Sarah's words echoed in my head, a declaration I hadn't expected. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear and defiance, and I knew she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. You didn't have to do that, I said later as we walked to my truck. I wanted to, she said, stopping to face me. I'm done hiding, Em. I'm with you and I want people to know. I kissed her then under the streetlights, her lips soft and sure against mine. It was our first kiss, and it felt like coming up for air after years underwater. She kissed me back, her hands in my hair, and for the first time I believed her. I believed in us, but the world wasn't as kind as that moment. The next day Sarah's mom called, her voice icy through the phone. Someone from the bar had talked, and now the whole town knew. Willow Creek wasn't exactly progressive, and Sarah's family was old school. Church every Sunday, family values etched into their bones. I held her as she cried, her phone discarded on the couch, her mom's words disgrace, sin, come home and fix this ringing in my ears. I don't care what they think, she said, her voice muffled against my chest. I choose you. But I saw the fear in her eyes, the weight of a life she'd never questioned until now. And I wondered if love would be enough to carry us through. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. Sarah was trying, God, she was trying, but the world was pushing back hard. Her mom's calls didn't stop, each one a fresh wound, and her coworkers whispered when she walked by. Nashville was a city of dreamers, but it still had its corners of judgment, and Sarah was learning that the hard way. I wanted to shield her, to take the hits for her, but all I could do was hold her hand and hope it was enough. We found refuge in small moments, cooking dinner in my tiny apartment, her teasing me about my terrible knife skills, driving out to the countryside where no one knew us, her head on my shoulder as we watched the stars. She was learning herself piece by piece, and I was learning her too, the way her laugh softened when she was nervous, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about art. But the weight of her family, her past, was always there, a shadow we couldn't outrun. One night, she showed up at my place, her eyes red and her hands shaking. They cut me off, she said, her voice hollow. My parents. They said I'm not their daughter anymore. I pulled her inside, my heart breaking as she collapsed onto the couch. They'll come around, I said, but the words felt empty. I knew her family knew the church they clung to, the small-town rules they lived by. I'd grown up in that world too, and I'd left it behind for a reason. They won't, she said, staring at the floor. And I don't know if I care. But it hurts, Sam. It hurts so much. I knelt in front of her, taking her hands. You're enough, I said, my voice fierce. You don't need them to tell you who you are. You're Sarah and you're mine, and that's all that matters. She looked at me, tears spilling over, and kissed me hard and desperate, like she was trying to anchor herself. I kissed her back, pouring everything I had into it. Every year I'd loved her. Every fear I'd swallowed, every hope I'd dared to hold. We ended up tangled on the couch, her hands under my shirt, my heart racing as we crossed the line we'd been dancing around for weeks. It wasn't just physical, it was a promise, a vow that we were in this together no matter what. But the world kept testing us. A week later, we were at a coffee shop when a group of guys from Willow Creek walked in. I recognized them, old high school friends of Sarah's brother. The kind who'd always looked at me like I didn't belong. They saw us holding hands and their smirks turned sharp. Well, damn, Sarah, one of them said, loud enough for the whole shop to hear. Didn't know you switched teams. Sarah's grip tightened, but she didn't let go. Mind your business, Travis, she said, her voice steady despite the flush in her cheeks. Travis laughed, his eyes flicking to me. What's this, Emily? Finally got your shot. I stood, my fists clenched, but Sarah was faster. Back off, she snapped, stepping between us. You don't get to talk to her like that. The shop went quiet, all eyes on us. Travis raised his hands, still grinning, and backed away. But the damage was done. Sarah was shaking as we left, her bravado crumbling the second we hit the street. I hate this, she whispered. I hate that they make me feel like I'm doing something wrong. You're not, I said, pulling her close. They're wrong. And they don't get to define us. She nodded, but I saw the doubt in her eyes, the fear that this was too hard, too much. I wanted to tell her it would get easier, that the world would catch up, but I wasn't sure I believed it myself. All I knew was that I loved her, and I'd fight for her even if it meant fighting her demons too. We kept going, carving out a life in the cracks of a world that didn't always want us. We went to Pride events, tentative at first, then bolder, her hand in mine as we navigated crowds of people who'd fought the same battles. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since college, her canvases filled with colors that felt like us, bold, messy, beautiful. I'd watch her work, her hair falling in her face, and I'd think, this is worth it. She's worth it. But then came the letter. It was slipped under her apartment door and signed, the handwriting sharp and angry. You're a disgrace. Go back to normal. Sarah laughed it off at first, but I saw the way her hand shook as she crumpled it up. I wanted to find whoever wrote it, to make them pay for the fear in her eyes, but all I could do was hold her and promise her we'd be okay. That night she lay in my arms, her voice soft. Do you think we can do this, Em? Really? I kissed her forehead, my heart steady despite the fear. Yeah, I said. We can. The letter wasn't the end of it. The whispers, the looks, the subtle ways people pulled away, they piled up, each one a brick in the wall between Sarah and the life she'd known. But she didn't run. She stayed with me, with us, and every day she chose me felt like a miracle. We were building something real, something ours, but the world wasn't done testing us. One evening, as winter crept into Nashville, Sarah got a call from her brother, Mark. He was the only one in her family who hadn't cut her off, the one who'd always had her back. He wants to meet, she told me, her voice cautious but hopeful. He says he wants to understand. We met him at a diner on the edge of town, a place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like home. Mark was older, broader, with the same blue eyes as Sarah but none of her softness. He hugged her, awkward and stiff, then nodded at me like I was a stranger. We sat, the air thick with things unsaid. I don't get it, Mark said finally, his hands wrapped around a mug. You were always normal. What changed? Sarah tensed, but her voice was steady. I didn't change, Mark. I just stopped pretending. He looked at me, then back at her, his jaw tight. Mom and Dad are a mess. They think you're throwing your life away. I'm not, she said, her hand finding mine under the table. I'm living it. Mark didn't say much after that, but he stayed, and when he left, he hugged Sarah again, longer this time. I just want you to be happy, he said, and I saw the tears in her eyes as he walked away. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall, a sliver of light. Spring came, and with it a shift. Sarah's paintings started selling at a local gallery, her confidence growing with every piece. We moved in together, a small apartment with a balcony where we'd drink coffee and watch the city wake up. The hate mail stopped, or maybe we just stopped noticing. We had each other, and that was enough to drown out the noise. One night we went back to the lake, the same one where it all began. The air was warm, the stars bright, and Sarah was quieter than usual, her hand tight in mine. We sat on the shore, our fishing rods forgotten, the water lapping at our feet. Remember that night? She asked, her voice soft. When I said I was scared? I nodded, my heart thudding. Yeah, you said you felt me. She turned to me, her eyes shining. I still do, Em. Every day. And I'm not scared anymore. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. My breath caught as she opened it, revealing a simple silver ring, glinting in the moonlight. I don't know what the future looks like, she said, her voice trembling but sure. But I know I want it with you. Will you marry me? Tears blurred my vision as I laughed, the sound breaking free like a dam bursting. Yes, I said, pulling her into my arms. God, yes. We kissed, the lake a witness to our promise, the stars brighter than I'd ever seen. The world hadn't changed, it was still messy, still hard, but we had. We'd found each other, fought for each other, and built a love that could withstand the storms. As we lay on the shore, her head on my chest, I thought about the girl I'd been at 16, hiding my heart behind a smile. I thought about the years of silence, the ache of loving her in secret. And I thought about now, this moment where love wasn't just enough, it was everything. We'd go back to Nashville, to our apartment, to our life. There'd be more battles, more whispers, but we'd face them together. Because Sarah wasn't just my friend anymore. She was my home, my future, my forever. And as the lake reflected the stars, I knew we'd keep fighting, keep loving, keep choosing each other, no matter what. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.